Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I am Kenneth Shark Kinney, your host and Chief Shark Officer. Let me tell you about two amazing sponsors who make this show possible. Let's talk first about Inbound. From marketing to sales and commerce to CX, Invoca's active conversation intelligence platform enables revenue teams to create better buying experiences, drive more leads, and increase revenue. Trusted by top brands like Dish Network, Mayo Clinic, Mutual of Omaha, and ADT, the Invoca team is doing some amazing work in turning conversational data into automated action to enhance digital touchpoints and human interaction. Next, let's talk about Outbound. I hope that you'll take a look at Drips, the founders of conversational texting, where they use conversational AI to help you reach customers where they're most responsive, and that's on their phones. And working with major brands like 3-Day Blinds, Liberty Mutual, Credit Repair, and Gainsco, Drips is leading the way for some of the biggest brands in the world to improve engagement rates and outcomes for their prospects and customers. And now back to the show. What does trust mean to you? What holds a lot of brands back from being considered trustworthy is complex. It's often inconsistency, but corporate and personal brands all over the world can contextualize this differently, even though trust means so much to us as humans, often in the same way across the globe. It may just be the way we approach trust and how we apply it. So I ask again, what does trust mean to you? David Horsager is the CEO of the Trust Edge Leadership Institute, a global authority on helping leaders and organizations become the most trusted in their industry, a keynote speaker and the author of Trusted Leader, 8 Pillars That Drive Results. And on this episode, we'll discuss the trusted leaders, the 8 pillars of trust, and they all start with C: root causes, consistency of a brand, measuring and contextualizing trust all over the world, a survey of most trusted brands, trust in a pandemic, hot chocolate trust, confusing Minnesota with Wisconsin, Chick-fil-A versus the DMV, the trusted guy that chopped down a cherry tree, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a Trust Edge CEO with what is obviously a trustworthy shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. David, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would tell us a little bit about your background, your career to date.
Kenneth, thanks so much. Hey, if I go back, I was on staff and then director of a youth and family organization out of college. Then I started my first company in 1999. Lisa and I did, no kids yet. And we thought if we could make $700 a month, we could keep our urgent bills out of the way. And I remember I started that business with one $500 invoice or that I could send out. And so we moved back to Minnesota after directing the organization in Arkansas. And I lived in the basement of 86-year-old Clara Miller's with, by that October, we had $1.40 to our name, no bathroom, kitchen, or windows in that basement. We'd go upstairs and share hers. We lived there for 2 years, so it kept expenses low. But little by little, I was asked to speak on some of this leadership curriculum I had created down at that organization, started more in the youth world, and then my grad work in the early and mid-2000s became very interesting and important around trust. And that was, almost 2 decades ago. That people much more important and interesting than me saw it, and that was very monumental in all this trust work we do. Fast forward, I've written 3 best-selling books on it. We do an ongoing piece of research every year, biggest study maybe at least out of North America on trust and leadership. We do, we measure trust. We use everything. We speak. I speak 100 times a year on trust or more. I guess last year in COVID out of studio, and we do training workshops. We do equipping where we certify others in our trust work, and basically we're just trying to develop trusted leaders and organizations around the world. And it really, in the last little over decade, the first decade was more challenging in the research happening, grad work. The second half, second decade, now, work with everything from pro sports teams to global governments on corruption issues to the biggest companies in the world on trust issues. And yeah.
So you're in Wisconsin now. What were you doing in Arkansas?
I'm in Minnesota, which is different than Wisconsin.
Why did I say that? I meant Minnesota.
I'll tell you what, I can almost throw a rock to it. But I'm on the Wisconsin side of Minnesota. But so I was director of basically the year-round program that comes out of the biggest Christian sports camp in the country. So I was director of K-Life, which is it stands for Kids Life, which is a little deceptive because it was really older. Like I was focused on college age, high school, and so forth. And so I was speaking a couple times a week then too, and I built some orientation for these leadership curriculum for these kind of the college leaders and stuff, and so that was a start, and it was faith-based organization that was non-denominational. I loved it. Had a great board. Learned a ton about leadership early on for a number of reasons there.
What city?
I was based, first of all, Branson, Missouri, and then Harrison, Arkansas.
Yeah, I know them both. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Much warmer summers than
yeah.
we're
Hot.
well, so, yeah, very hot. So, David, what does trust mean to you?
Well, I mean, I can get academic quickly after now having been a professor and having studied it so research based. But I mean, in a simple way, it means everything. Whether it's with my wife, my kids, my organization. I mean, it really. I believe a lack of trust. And the research proves this, but I believe it in my heart too. A lack of trust really is the biggest cost of an organization. I believe the question everybody's asking about you, Kenneth, about me, whether it's your spouse, partner, friends, or clients and customers, is not, do I like you? I mean, I've got friends I like a lot, right? I wouldn't go into business with them in a million years because I don't trust them. It's can I trust you? And that's where with the board work I do, the biggest job of a board is to mitigate risks around trust. I believe losing trust. I believe, I think one thing now, and this gets shown in my newest book, Trusted Leader, that just came out, but it is a core. It's just not rote thinking from research. It is the root issue is always a trust issue. It's not as an example, a leadership issue. The reason I follow lead or not is trust. It's not a sales issue. The reason I buy or not has something to do with trust. It's not a learning issue. The reason any kid learns anything in a classroom is the trust of the content, the teacher, or the trust or psychological safety of the room. It's not innovation only goes up when people trust each other, then they share ideas. And the biggest Harvard study shows diversity as a problem. Diversity on its own tends to pit people against each other unless we increase trust. The only way to get the benefits of diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging is increased trust. Or even marketing. There's only one way to increase amplify a marketing message. You got to increase trust in the message. So that became, now you can see, I can say that real quickly. I bet that's just a line. Well, it's not a line. It's a hardcore issue for me that it is trust matters more than ever, but it always mattered. But it really is the real core issue, not communication or leadership or, these kind of things. So that's part of it.
Well, one of my favorite slides at almost every presentation I do is some dumb picture I got from somewhere, because there were only so many trust pictures you can come up, you can find. And it was some wooden blocks that form the word trust, because I hear everybody talking about like, know, and trust all day long. And all they focus on is like and know. But when you throw the word trust in there, it doesn't resonate with people. They don't understand what it means, but it makes or breaks, as you just say, it makes or breaks every relationship you've got with anybody you work for, buy from, work with. It can make or break everything.
And I might add, it's more complex than people think. So even I thought, I know it all about. It's just integrity, or it's just character. It's not. It's more complex. It's like I think, as an example, some people would argue trust is transparency or vulnerability. It's just transparency. Now that can be really important and good. There's a lot of data around that. But the problem is, some of your kids are so transparent on social media, I don't trust them for a second. Because confidentiality is also trusted. So it's a little, even this, though it's this root issue, it's not just, it takes a long time to build trust. In a moment of crisis, trust is built like that. It's not, if I extend more trust to my team, I'll get more out of them. Until I extend too much. So some of these trite or simple phrases people think trust is, it's not a full enough view of this concept of trust that actually does affect everything more than anything, whether it's in business or personally.
So let's talk about your new book then. Came out in 2021, right as the pandemic was starting to wind down, whenever that is. It may be a nebulous date from here on out, but Trusted Leader, 8 Pillars That Drive Results. What was the inspiration for that book? And tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, a couple things about that. Trust Edge, which is still selling and is evergreen, is just kind of 300 and some pages. It's got some of the research and it's relevant and usable. And then Daily Edge was simple, actionable tools. Trusted Leader, one, we've learned a lot in the decades since Trust Edge was built or written. And two, people want something simpler and quicker to apply. So the first half of Trusted Leader is this great parable business parable that shifts thinking about trust. So people see how it matters more than ever. So they see, oh, trust is the root issue, and they kind of have this epiphany boardroom experience tied with this story of this entrepreneur and who could have lost everything and ends up basically saving the place based on this shift of thinking around trust, which in fact is based on a true story of some organizations I worked with. So that seeing trust as the root issue, I kept seeing two probably problems before this book. One, they don't see trust as the root issue. People don't. And number two, it's something people either they think they have it or they don't, when in fact you can actively build it every day. And so that the first half of the book kind of shifts thinking. The second half of the book is then a quick look at the 8-pillar framework and ways that people can build those pillars starting tomorrow morning. So some quick takeaways. The way I lost 52 pounds in 5.5 months, it's in the book. The way we've had people say they use this one idea, they tripled sales in 90 days. That's in the book. The way people have, kind of built this 8-pillar framework, which is why, the 8 that I believe trust is built on. There's takeaways that are quicker and more usable, tomorrow morning.
And they all had to start with C, which was...
They start with C, but let's be clear here, because that can really come across quickly as some cheesy motivational book. They represent, each of those 8 represent a research funnel, or a meaning. So, I can whip through them really quickly so people understand. Okay.
Clarity, compassion, character, competency, commitment, connection, contribution, and consistency.
Right. So I believe you can solve every organizational leadership issue against these 8 when you language it against these 8. This doesn't mean I'm perfect at it. It doesn't mean we don't contextualize for work around the world, but we think about it. Clarity. Okay, people trust the clear and they mistrust or distrust the ambiguous or the overly complex. We find both problems as much, people over complexifying. Compassion. People trust those that feel like that they care beyond themselves. I have a hard time following or being accountable to someone I don't believe cares beyond them. Even if they don't care about me, they care about something missionally beyond themselves. Character. We kind of flesh that out. It's not just integrity. It's really critical. And once again, sometimes people believe in a false psychology that you have all the character you're going to have by 12 years old. It's not true. We're moving toward or away from character every day. So in fact, in our incentive programs up here in Minnesota, a big bank was incentivizing a lack of character in the last billions, right? So competency, this is why I might trust Kenneth to take my kids to the ball game but not give me a root canal because of competency. You got to be competent in the way you're going to be trusted. And commitment, and the next one's connection, the ability to connect and collaborate. The next one's contribution. Contribution, by the way, the number one word that came out of that research funnel was contribute results, performance, outcomes. You can't just have compassion and character and not contribute the results I expected or asked for. And then you have consistency, and that's the queen and king of the pillars. Whatever you do consistently, I'll trust, right? If you're late all the time, I will trust you to be late. So that that's a quick. This is a whole life's work of a couple decades, and I can go into any of these 8 pillars for at least a full day each. But there's an overview of the 8.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating because there are a lot of speakers who are known for one specific topic, but because you provide so much research around your own topic, it's hard not to trust your trusted topic. So what do you find that generally holds brands back from being considered trustworthy?
Well, that's a big question. You could go through any of the pillars, but commonly they are not consistent. A brand is built on consistency, just like an individual is built on reputation. A reputation, excuse me, is built on consistency. Whatever I do, I said it before, if I'm late all the time, I will trust you to be late. So whatever you do consistently. However, there's actually lower trust if you're late sometimes, on time sometimes, this way sometimes, it's all over the place. It's like, oh, I can't trust you, right? And that's the same with a brand. If I go and I see, go to this bank, and the loan officer is amazing, but the teller is terrible. And then the paper is like a little glossy and really cool to understand. Then I go to the web portal, it's terrible to use. That inconsistently just lost their brand. So one thing that kills brands is inconsistency in touch. It's the same with franchises. It does not matter where I go. If I go to Chick-fil-A, they're going to say my pleasure, right? The line's going to go faster. Don't we wish the DMV would learn from Chick-fil-A? They know how to do certain things they're the same. Whatever people believe politically or not, it's just there's consistency certain places. On the other hand, franchises that don't have consistency, they've lost. And it's any organization, but that's a way to build a brand or not is be consistent. Um, in whatever way, in experience,
Yeah.
basically.
Well, if I could just get a sweet tea and a chicken sandwich at the DMV, I would get a new license every week.
You'll stand in line for that.
Exactly. Well, you work with a myriad of global brands. How much does trust also alter across the world? The way you look, your worldview of trust, if you will, is much different than someone that's in Nigeria or Brazil or England. How do you sort of establish that framework that's consistent as well?
In one way, I'll tell you this: we're human all around the world. It turns out. So, I have a friend that he's a wealth basically manager for just kind of like these wealthy families to the next generation or whatever. And he said everybody comes to me, and they think they're totally unique. And our family's different. Oh, our wealth problems are different. And they're all the same, almost all the same. But he listens and he loves them, right? And in a way, that's the same about trust. So in a way, whether I'm dealing with corruption issues in East Africa, or I'm dealing with some issue with the New York Yankees, or whether I'm dealing with a business issue at FedEx or whatever, they're in many ways the same because they include one commonality, and that's humans. Okay? Now, that does not mean we don't contextualize. So here's what we found from our framework. We found, number one, overall, a lack of trust is still the biggest cost, whether you're a nonprofit, a for-profit, a person, it doesn't matter, marketer, whatever, around the world. And absolutely trust is the leading indicator around the world, every organization. The 8 pillars actually also are from our both experience, our research, global studies, our and we have certified coaches on 6 continents. So all those things point to that these 8 are the way trust is built globally. And so, but how I apply those 8. So as an example, then I contextualize. So as an example, in parts of America, I better start with that contribution pillar. They want results right now. In parts of, let's say, Latin America, you better start with the connection pillar or you're never going to get results. This does not mean, by the way, because some Americans misjudge and they think, well, they don't want results. They want results too. You better start with connection. By the way, Americans, it turns out, want to connect and collaborate. They're human too, but you better start with results. So where I start might be contextualized a little different. Furthermore, if I go down the 8-pillar framework, how I apply it in a context, what we say 2 levels down might need to be contextualized. All 8 work around the world. We're going a little deeper than we might have wanted to, but let's try to stay with me. So these 8 work globally. I can use them with anything, but how I apply them. So let's take the compassion pillar. 1 level down, one way we show compassion in the workplace is listening. It turns out around the world, people feel cared about when they feel listened to. Doesn't matter who you are, what color of skin you have, what context you're in. However, now the 2nd level down, how I listen. In America, generally speaking, listening by looking someone in the eye builds the most compassion that builds the most trust. In a certain part of the Middle East, depending on who I am and where I sit, I may build the most trust by not looking someone in the eye while listening. That shows compassion that builds trust. So that's where I'm thinking about it. And I can get, just as long as you ask the context question, we can go just a little bit different, 2 ways. One, let's think about it even in context of role. So let's take clarity. Okay, what's most important? Well, there's a lot of types of clarity that's important, but let's take the leader. Maybe that leader is not trusted because they're not clear about the vision. Let's take the manager. Maybe that manager is not trusted because they're not clear about the expectations. Now let's take the salesperson. This salesperson, wow, they're so clear about how cool they are and how long they've been in business and the history of their company. No one's buying because turns out they're not clear about the benefits of that product to me, the potential buyer. What about the classroom? This teacher, they're compassionate. They got the character pillar. They're amazing. Why do the kids hate the teacher? It turns out, we found out, They're not clear about the assignments, so the kids go home frustrated every day. In that case, it was asking under these pillars, what does this mean to me? What's clarity mean here? What's compassion mean to me? So I can even contextualize, even in a, a little bit of a more, same nationality setting or whatever you want to say, right? So
Well, when you work with brands today, where do they sort of identify to themselves whether or not they are trusted? Because one of the things I saw recently was another most trusted brands globally survey. And one of the things I found was just fascinating was Google was again ranked number one. And they had looked at Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Spain, US, a bunch of different countries. And Google, of all the companies, leverages as much data, if not more, to figure out what you're doing and not doing as Facebook does. Facebook will never be back on that list ever again. And I was just fascinated to see all these different types of brands that when I think of it through a digital marketing perspective, it's just these are companies that are able to accumulate massive amounts of data, yet somehow people are still able to trust in Google. And I don't know, for whatever, there's a question there somewhere, but I find that fascinating that the most trusted brands globally in 2021 were Google, PayPal, Microsoft, YouTube, Amazon, Sony, Adidas, Netflix, which I didn't even understand, Visa, Samsung, Nike, Nestle, apparently are hot chocolates, a trustworthy topic, MasterCard, Disney, and Colgate. And while I get some of the ones that feel good, maybe a Disney, a Nestle, or Netflix, I was honestly shocked at Visa and PayPal, other than you trust them with your money. But Google and Amazon, I was just honestly kind of amazed to see them on there.
Well, I would like to see how the questions were asked. So in our world, we have 6 ways we measure trust in an organization. And in a person too. We have an enterprise trust index for massive organizations, big universities and companies, and we can close gaps there. All the way down to self-assessments, team assessment, customer assessment, and so forth. So if anybody wants to measure trust, that's, I think we do it as well or better than anyone, but it's based on the framework. Now, the one thing we take into consideration is the character pillar, and that is because we believe it's a part of long-term trust. So I don't know if they're measuring that or not, but as an example, people might trust, the outliers generally of this pillar are media or celebrities. So as an example, you might trust a certain golfer to hit the ball better than anybody else, but you wouldn't want him alone with your wife, right? Because of the character, you might trust the Kardashians or whatever to in essence not wear enough clothes almost, right? Or you might entrust certain people to be, because they're entertainers, that's what they're trusted for, but you wouldn't trust them with character things, high character things. So I'm not sure how those questions were asked, because you're going to trust Google as probably the best search engine, but I may not trust them with certain things, as an example, right? So they, a little bit of this, it matters how you define trust and how you ask these questions, because, even that we interpret a little bit differently.
What does your research show you pre-pandemic and post-pandemic as it relates to trust, especially with leaders and brands? Because, as much as we've discussed how employees have learned to deal with the pandemic, I don't think most leaders had a clue how to deal with it at all. And
Right.
It's destroyed a lot of relationships. And that's not all their fault, because they're human too.
As far as post and pre, there's so much here. Okay. So, institutional trust keeps tanking. So in other words, where in 19, when before Nick Watergate, 80% of Americans trusted our government to basically do what was right. Right before the pandemic, it was like down to 7% or something. Now it's like 3% or something crazy that trusted the government. But all institutional trust almost is tanking. So think of the institution of school now. That's going down. That's why people are getting into homeschooling, charter schools more than ever before. You think of the institution of faith, the church. I mean, about the same number of people in America say they believe in God, and yet the number of the metrics for showing it, giving, going to a place of worship, that's down steeply. So that's one thing that's happening. There's a whole lot of other things we could jump on, but I'll give a couple things. Some things that have happened that people are getting Zoom fatigued and all these kind of things, but there are some positives. So, as an example, one thing that teams have noticed when they've got in the virtual environment, uh, introverts are more willing to share great ideas than they were if they were in the boardroom or face-to-face training environment. It's just it was a surprise. It's like, hey, we're getting more voices heard because it seems like there's more equal ground sometimes in a virtual environment. Some other things that have happened is in some cases, communication has gone up drastically because people have learned technology. So actually, clarity has gone up in certain spaces, and because of the use of technology. So, I mean, there's a couple quick thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a value in particular, and it's why people go to work for companies or stay with managers. There's a value for mid-level and senior management getting this kind of certification and knowing how to deal with trust to bridge that great divide that is created by communication brand babble or just company screw ups, data breaches, everything else, and establishing that trust that you have one-on-one with your manager and things like that can make all the difference in the world.
People are longing for the connection pillar.
Exactly.
Connection and collaboration. And we have a really cool exercise that we do and our certifieds can offer, and that's called the Trust Shield. But it breaks down the walls, it connects people in a unique way, but they're long. That's one thing I will say, that exercise has gotten used more than ever through the pandemic time. So that's definitely a truth that and people also saw that we actually, at the core, have always wanted to connect and collaborate, but it brought it to the forefront because some people were just kind of able to just focus on the results pillar, which is critical too, by the way, but that the contribution pillar. But it's like, oh, it works better if we can actually do it this way where we actually connect.
Talk a little bit about the Trust Edge certification. How does someone go about getting that and applying that in their business life or for their brand?
Yep. Well, in Trusted Certification, we serve basically two different avatars. One is we serve, if you're in, learning, talent development in a company, HR, you want to drive trust into your organization. We certify folks inside some of the biggest companies in the world to use our measurement tools, our training tools, our platform. We have this amazing community of people that, serve in a corporate organization, and they want the best learning and development or leadership development tools. People have said this is the best leadership development they've ever had. The other types of people we serve are they're consultants, they're advisors, they're independent coaches that have an independent coaching practice, and they want to use, like they might be certified in something else, they want to use our tools. They want to be around an amazing community. They want to come to our annual event, but they want to ongoing be served with our tools so that they can apply this world-class both research, measurement tools, and training tools so they can use it if they're coaching someone one-on-one. We have a coaching concepts guide. If they want to do a full day executive retreat, we have it set. They can use the Trust Edge tools to do a full day or 2-day executive retreat. If they want to do take a team through a year program, whether virtually or in person, we have Trust Edge Simplified. They can do that, and then they can even measure, and they're around other amazing folks too. So they have access to our community, and then we have an annual event, and we have just a whole lot of ways we serve them with tools, reinforcement for the long term, not just kind of a one and done. Here's what you can do. I mean, ways to keep this going in an organization as well. So community. Flexibility. Well, I think we offer the most flexible approach of someone's IP as anybody. We give so much free reign in how they use it because our heart is to make an impact with it. If your listeners would like to see a free demo without, anything else, just email or I think Trust Edge right now, trustedgecoaching.com or trustedgepartners.com or trustedge.com. You can go everywhere from there. Would have a way to see a free demo or reach out. We'd love to show it to you. If anybody's interested at all, no worry about anything. We'll even, I think, give you a bunch of free stuff with that. So,
well, David, I ask this of everyone who's been on the show. There are not a lot of sharks in the Minnesota neighborhood. There are some small ones at the Mall America Sea Odyssey Aquarium.
Yeah. Yep.
What is you're on a shark's perspective. What is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Boy,
You've been diving.
What's that?
You're a diver.
I love to dive. And I'll say that because I really enjoyed being around the nurse sharks because I could get close and practically touch them, right? So there's something about that. I think there's something about a big bull shark or blue that just like, what? It's so huge. It just takes your breath away. So I guess I'll just give those two shout outs quick.
Sounds good. Well, David, it's a special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Here we go.
All right.
And these are not pre-asked. Let me tell you, you don't let anybody know. So
No.
let me give you the first answer. So let's see. First answer: cottage cheese.
Good one, but one of the nastiest foods on the planet. So let's go with number 1: trustworthy leaders, Lincoln or Washington?
That is fascinating. That is, I'll go today with George Washington over Lincoln because the willingness of people don't realize way back then the fierceness. If anybody hasn't read the 5,000-Year Leap, I mean,
Yes.
this idea of he could have become king, and he sacrificed and just made it happen so that this really republic, this democracy would in effect start, and it was on him and his own selfishness or not. So I'll go with Washington.
I have read that book. It was a fascinating book, and Washington also cut down a cherry tree and couldn't lie about it. So trustworthy. All right, number 2. This was another survey question. So I'll ask you, which is more trustworthy, a trustworthy actor or actress, Tom Hanks or Morgan Freeman?
I'll go with Freeman.
So I saw Tom Hanks as number 1, and I thought it was just odd as could be. But I mean, Morgan Freeman's been God in multiple movies.
Yeah.
So you got to trust him.
Exactly.
All right.
Morgan Freeman over Tom Hanks. Here we go. I'll put it down.
Put it down. Number 3, Pinocchio or Geppetto?
I'm going to get buzzed out on this one. I don't have a fave.
Well, I mean, Pinocchio lied, but he did, he had a good heart and he came back.
Came around. So. Yeah.
All right. Number 4, which is more trustworthy, government or TV news?
Oh my goodness. And what do you mean by
government? This is not even a political statement.
Yeah, I hear you. So here's the problem. When we say government, we have to say, local school boards. That's the closest government to our, basically to each of us. In essence,
True.
that's
all right. Let's make this tougher. Federal government or Facebook?
What was the first one? What was the first way you said it?
Government or TV news?
Yeah, I mean, it also. Here's what I'll say about this. That'll maybe not be a mic drop, but I'll give it what I got, and that is this: people are a function of where they get their information. So the problem with either of those is if I find someone that just believes what I want to believe, they can just fan the flame. And media does it, and government does it. And here's the problem. The problem is we can even try to find another voice and have a hard time getting it because of our sphere of influence, because it's so much easier and in fact more fun to be around people that are nodding when we talk instead of someone who's disagreeing all the time, unless you love that kind of thing. And the other thing is, so I'll say this about government because I'll give a shout out here quickly. I like to look for where is trust being built for the greater good. This is not a perfect group at all, but their heart when Governor Huntsman from Utah and goodness, who ran for vice president with McCain?
Palin?
No, the independent. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
The Connecticut.
Yes. They basically became a part of this movement, and now basically there's 40 representatives and senators, 20 Republicans, 20 Democrats. They're not the ones you see on the news that are rabidly over to the right or left. They're ones that actually want to come together and get something done. And so there are people, when I say government, it's like we all focus so much when we say all government's bad. There are actually, believe it or not, and I've been there, people that actually got into it because they wanted to make positive change and work together, but we don't hear from them.
Yeah. Joe Lieberman's who we were trying to think of.
Yeah, Joe Lieberman. Right.
But if we had Washington or Lincoln today, somehow they would have ended up as political pundits on either CNN or Fox, and then they would have called the other one an idiot. So it's an erosion of trust that I wish would go away. All right, number 5.
Well, here's another problem. We can talk about this on the next show, but it is this. There's in many ways, this is the sadness. It's with great sadness that I say this, but we are continually and at multiplying speeds incentivizing a lack of trust.
Yes.
So we're incentivizing a lack of trust in media because you get paid more. If you get people against you, that's the best way ever. You get eyeballs. And in fact, we're unfortunately incentivizing a lack of trust in government. So if we don't, I mean, I don't want to put myself on any side, but if we don't go toward term limits, if we don't start saying, you're not going to pull me off a committee if I speak to someone from the other side. I mean, we got big problems on either side, by the way, and both sides do it.
Agreed. All right. Number 5, and the most interesting and important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Wow. That's a tough one. I'm going to go with biscuits today.
Good man. Good man.
I can put honey and butter on either one of them and be happy, though.
That's a good point. But gravy wouldn't taste so great.
You can't do gravy on one. You got way more options with biscuits.
Yeah, but chili doesn't taste good on biscuits. So there you go. David, where can people find out more about you, some trustworthy sources, including about the certification, and get a copy of the book and more?
Sure. The newest book is called Trusted Leader, not The Trusted Leader, just Trusted Leader. But trustedge.com, you can go everywhere. Trustedge, www.trustedge.com. DavidHorsager.com, if you can spell that, you can get there. Those would be places to get going. And yeah, I invite you all anybody interested at all to become part of the community, get certified, and just at least have a demo on what that would be like.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David, for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you.
So there was my conversation with David Horsager, the CEO of the Trust Edge Leadership Institute, a global authority on helping leaders and organizations become the most trusted in their industry, a keynote speaker, and the author of Trusted Leader, 8 Pillars That Drive Results. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, love this subject. David's belief, and you would be hard-pressed to convince me otherwise as well, is that a lack of trust is the biggest cost of an organization. And that can be defined in so many ways, but he points out that it's not a leadership issue. It's not a sales issue or communications. Trust is the root issue. And in an age where we're running very short of it, trust matters now more than ever. And I've said on so many episodes of the show and in so many of my own presentations on stage, we've spent too much time on like and know, but not nearly enough on trust. Honestly, this is the one that I've struggled with the most, and I work on the hardest every day. Second, as he further points out, trust is more complex than it sounds. It's not just a quick fix, and it's not just an academic phrase that many people are going to discount. He breaks it down to these 8 pillars of trust: clarity, compassion, character, competency, commitment, connection, contribution, and consistency. Makes for some pretty strong pillars that we hope won't erode or break. Third, I mentioned a survey with most trusted brands. Some of the results I called BS, and we see these all the time. But be careful about brand surveys, especially as David points out, as to how the questions are asked. I mean, are you really going to tell me that most people trust Google with their data? Trust it to give a great search result? Sure. With data that they sell to other brands or any similar type company? Maybe better than Facebook or Amazon, but come on. David said it simply matters how you define trust and how you ask these questions, because even that we interpret a little bit differently. Very true. So here's a sample question on a brand that I will admit I love. Would you trust brands in that survey like Google and Microsoft and Netflix more than, say, trusting St. Jude Children's Hospital? Seriously, It matters how we define trust. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time, and I'm so thankful to everyone who listens. Thank you to the amazing sponsors, Invoke and Drebs. Please consider writing a review and letting me know your thoughts on the show. I do not in any way discount this whatsoever. Thank you for trusting me with your time. It sincerely means so much, and please join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.